Hello, this is Paul, and we're on the second part of working with base. And as we know that base is part of a series of programs that's brought together by OpenOffice.org. Now, in the first part of this lesson is that we realized that we worked with databases most of our lives and has become very natural. As we set up our database, we are able to work with our bank accounts. We're able to work with a phone book. We're able to work with many different elements in our life that is developed from a common database. Take notice that databases do have similar information as one record is taken to another. So let's talk about how to develop our database now. And we're going to create a rough draft with what we want to see in our reports and presentations. This is a very necessary step that will be able to help you understand what elements you need to put your reports and presentations together. The next step is to determine what those elements are and be able to see what is necessary to be stored on the drive for this purpose. The next step of this process is to go over our elements and realize what we are dealing with. We need to realize if we have any calculated data in our report or if it is straightforward from our database. Most often we will create a lot of databases that are straightforward. And it's like names and addresses, and there is no calculation needed. Meanwhile, if we're working with a database that are taking care of accounts, we might want to have some calculated fields in there to be able to make that determination. Now, how much data is repeated is another item to realize so that we don't take up a lot of space on our drive that is unnecessary but has repeated data. And with this, we're able to develop what is called relational data. We will get into that later on. I have a set of records already designed for my music. And what I'm talking about here is that I have a CD player that holds 300 CDs. And they are able to be sorted out with a grouping up to 5 different groups, and these discs can be repeated over and over as I go from one group to another. So I'm looking to create a database to know what my music is and how they are being utilized on my CD player. Now that is what I have displayed here. Take notice that we are going to learn how to interpret this and recognize the different parts of my elements. Take notice I do have a title, the artist, and I have a disc number, and also I have a set of portions there where it can be sorted out 5 different times. There is also another field that interprets what that field stands for, that I can have a proper report to know what I have and what type of music I'm listening to. Now, taking these elements that I have pointed out in my spreadsheet here, I am able to identify different types of data. Looking into base, we are able to create a database, and the thing I want to point out that there are different types of fields in this database to be created, and there's a whole list of them. Let's take a look at these and identify what they are and how they are used. We will be getting back to that list very soon, but let's take a look at the different types of data that is talked about there. First, we're going to talk about numerical fields, and they are featured with a decimal, a float, integer of several sizes. It's a tiny integer, a double, and real. Now, these are elements of numerical fields alone. Numerical fields are basically used for calculations. Now, if there's not going to be any calculations, then you're looking at the wrong type of fields with a numerical order. And we will talk about what that order is very shortly. Before I get into the type of field that we use most often, I'd like to talk about some other fields that have been given to us for easy manipulation. And first of all, I'd like to talk about the Boolean field. That is a logical field which has yes or no, or true or false, and it is a very simple on and off feature. Next we have is a date order. We are able to calculate dates not only from one date to another, but also predict when due dates are. Now there's also a time field that also we can take a date and time stamp together. So these are a couple fields that has been created to be able to handle dates and also logical fields to allow us to create certain groupings. Now I can just talk about the character fields, and we're talking about a text field that is displayed here three different ways, and that is a fixed character, a variable character, and variable characters, and ignore the case. In other words, we can set up text fields without any reference to what is capitalized. Sometimes that might be very ideal, as in some names will start with a lowercase, as in Van something or other, and V is not capitalized, and other names might start the same way. So that might be appropriate if your database has such names in it. Now I need to talk to you finally about the memo field. When you establish a memo field, it will establish a field in your database that is 10 characters long. And what it actually does is it will record a code that goes into a relational database that will record a memo that can be variable length. Now take notice that when this file is created, it is a major size that will take up room on your disk. As it fills up from different data of your database, it will record these memos with those links inside of it. Now, when that gets filled up, another block of data for the memo will be created, and it'll increase in increments that way. In other words, it's not storing information as you create it. It has a bunch of empty space until it is used up according to the block for the memo that you create as you use your database. Now that we have a basic understanding of what the database is about with the elements that we're going to use, we're going to identify these fields with what's on my spreadsheet. First, I'm looking at the title of one column there, and it has the longest number of characters being used in there as 41. And I might make this a little bit larger so that if I put any new titles in that might take up a couple extra spaces, I want to go to 45 spaces in my database. Next, I will look at the artist field, and this has 30 spaces, and I might keep this at 30 spaces in my database because it's very unlikely that it will go any larger. However, be aware that we can adjust this and make it larger if it is necessary. So the length of these fields are not fixed unless we have a special type of field that we're going to talk about later. I'm going to identify the next 5 fields at one time. and they are known as P1, P2, P3, P4, and P5. They represent the different groupings on my CD player that I have talked about, and they can have any number of my CDs in it at one time, and also they are capable of being repeated in other fields as well. So the 5 fields I have identified here is by an X to indicate a logical field. They take up only one space in my database, but I'm not going to import it as a logical field, but I'm going to keep it as a character. Later on, we're going to translate this over to a numerical field, because I'm going to have it linked to what is called relational. I'll get into that later on. Like I've already said, it is a good idea for me to combine all 3 of these fields together and have it set up as a single field, and I can save a lot of disk space this way. The only thing I'm going to lose on this is if I use one CD in more than one grouping, and I can handle that. But we're going to move on and be able to remember that we need to import this file that needs to be structured exactly as it is in the file that I'm importing. And that is what I have on display right here. It must be matched exactly, or else it won't go in properly. So remember that in your plans. Once it's imported, we can make changes to it as necessary. Finally, I have a mood field. It will identify each segment on my CD player and how I have this CD stored and be able to be used in different moods. It must be imported exactly as is, but later on we're going to develop a separate database that will be relational and be able to save a lot of space on our hard drive. Let's summarize. We have a title field with 45 spaces. I have title, comma C, which stands for character, and then a comma 45, which means for 45 spaces. Next, then we have an artist field, and it is also a character field, which I have a C with a comma for 30 spaces. And this is how it's written on my plan on paper. And then finally, I go to another field that is for a disk number. This has 3 spaces in it, but take notice I write this a little bit differently. It is disk, comma, N for numeric, comma, 3 for 3 spaces, and an extra comma for 0, which means there are no decimal points. Now, I need to discuss with you why use of a numerical field for this. And it's all in how it is sorted. Take notice that I have the ASCII chart here, or part of it. And to notice that everything in a character field is going to be sorted in the order of the ASCII number. Take notice that there is a number for each one, and if we put things in order as a ASCII character, we might not get the same result. This is a quick chart for you to look at that will show you the difference of what the order will give you as we choose between a character order and a numeric order. I will explain more of this in the next segment. I'm running out of time for what is allowed at one clip, and I will pick this up in part 3.